Welcome back. We're just so glad you could join us today.
Absolutely.
Because if you are that person who is endlessly curious about what makes people tick, you are in the exact right place.
You really are.
Today we have a custom-tailored deep dive just for you. Our mission is basically cracking the code of a very specific, which details a constitutional type known as Staphysagria.
Yeah, and it's a profound character study, really. But before we get too far into the weeds, I think it might be helpful to define what we are actually looking at here.
Right, for sure.
Because for those who might not be familiar with this specific field, in homeopathy, a constitutional type isn't just a standard personality test. It's not like a magazine quiz.
Right, it's a lot deeper than that.
Exactly. It's a holistic framework. It attempts to link a person's deepest emotional tendencies directly to their physical traits, their behaviors, and even their physical ailments.
So we aren't just looking at how someone acts in a social setting. We're looking at an entire mind-body ecosystem, at least according to this specific approach.
Right. Mind, body, emotions, all intrinsically linked.
That context is super helpful. And as we get into this framework, I want you, the listener, to imagine a ticking time bomb of unexpressed emotion. But here's the catch. It might be hiding in plain sight. This profile could be disguised as the absolute sweetest, most accommodating person you know.
Oh, okay.
Or, strangely enough, it could be the reckless extreme sports junkie who is always chasing the next adrenaline high. Or even that charming, smooth-talking socialite who seems to just glide through life.
It's incredible how varied the masks can be.
Yeah, and we're going to look at how all these wildly different masks actually cover up the exact same core wound.
Which is exactly why establishing this foundation is so important for this deep dive. Exploring these archetypes, whether you look at them as clinical models or just philosophical concepts, it provides us with this fascinating lens for understanding the hidden, universal drivers of human behavior. Specifically, we are going to be exploring the devastating, life-altering power of suppressed emotion and how the human mind will do almost anything to avoid confronting it head-on.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the absolute core of this Staphysagria personality? Like, where does a suppression this deep actually come from? Are people just born with this disposition?
Oh, the absolute keynote of this constitutional type, the engine driving everything else we're going to discuss today, is suppressed anger.
Just anger.
Suppressed anger, yes. And it's crucial to distinguish this from someone who is just, mildly annoyed and keeping quiet to be polite at a dinner party.
Right, biting their tongue because the host burned the roast.
Exactly. Not that. This is a deep, smoldering resentment that is acutely felt by the individual, but it is strictly, almost pathologically, not expressed.
Wow.
In this homeopathic framework, the author argues that the force of this unexpressed anger is so strong that it actually rebounds upon the body and the psyche.
So it turns inward.
It turns entirely inward. As for where it comes from, the source material suggests it almost entirely originates in early childhood.
So what kind of childhood environment creates that level of extreme suppression? Because we all get mad as kids.
We do. But with this profile, it usually traces back to restrictive, heavily authoritarian parents.
Okay.
The young child learns very early on that it is fundamentally unsafe to express displeasure. Any resistance on their part simply leads to stricter, harsher punishment.
Right.
But it isn't always physical strictness. Sometimes the environment is defined by constant verbal put-downs. A child being repeatedly told they are good for nothing or that their feelings are just a burden to the family.
So the child's basic emotional expression just gets shut down before it even really develops.
Mm-hmm.
They realize pretty quickly that speaking up is a losing game.
Precisely. And there is also a more subtle dynamic outlined in the pages we reviewed. The child subconsciously senses the parent's own deep fear of aggression.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because that kind of nervous fear is highly infectious, the child absorbs it like a sponge. Whatever the exact mechanism in the home happens to be, the end result is the same. The child develops an intense, paralyzing fear of confrontation and aggression.
And that fear becomes a dominant life force.
Exactly. They move through the world anticipating conflict and doing literally everything in their power to preemptively neutralize it.
Man, I am just trying to imagine walking around with that heavy armor every single day.
It's a massive burden.
And the author mentions that when this anger finally does become conscious and undeniable to the person, it just takes over their whole personality. It becomes completely obsessive.
It is entirely draining for them. It builds this enormous reservoir of tension in the mind and the body. It is essentially like a pressure cooker where the release valve has been welded shut.
But wait, I'm trying to wrap my head around the release mechanism. The text provides a really vivid analogy about when the anger finally erupts, which is usually triggered by a painful rejection from a loved one.
Yeah.
It describes the outburst as being like lancing a single boil in a body that is completely septic. But if they are finally blowing off steam and having an outburst, shouldn't that cure the underlying anger? Like, why doesn't the pressure stay down after that?
That is a great question, and it's really the tragedy of this specific profile. One outburst doesn't drain the massive reservoir they have built up over a lifetime.
It's just a drop in the bucket.
Exactly. According to the text, when they finally erupt, the immediate surface tension is briefly diffused. But because the underlying root of the anger, that deep-seated childhood fear and the feelings of worthlessness, hasn't been addressed, the valve immediately seals back up.
So they just start bottling it up again immediately.
Right. They exhaust themselves completely with a single outburst, only to have another wave of pressure start brewing right behind it. They are fighting the symptom, not the actual disease.
So how does a person actually function in the adult world with that kind of internal pressure cooker?
Well, they adapt.
Right. And to navigate this, the source material breaks this personality down into 4 distinct subtypes. There are essentially 4 different survival strategies for dealing with the exact same suppressed rage.
Yes. 4 very different masks.
Let's start with the one that seems the most repressed, the sweet Staphysagria.
The sweet type is often seen in women, though certainly in men as well, and it is the polar behavioral opposite of boiling anger.
You're just incredibly nice.
Beyond nice. This type learns in childhood to avoid pain by simply being good, and I mean overwhelmingly, perfectly good. They become utterly compliant, practically incapable of expressing opposition to literally anything.
The examples provided are almost hard to believe. It highlights how they will actually apologize to a stranger who steps on their foot in a queue.
Yes.
It's that knee-jerk reaction to assume they are at fault just for existing in the same space.
And what's fascinating here is that this mildness is not genuine peace. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see a desperate, highly unhealthy attempt to avoid aggression.
They are terrified.
Terrified. So, to ensure they aren't attacked or criticized, they make themselves indispensable. They often choose dominant, even abusive partners. Or, conversely, they might choose partners with a severe physical disability or emotional instability, dedicating themselves entirely to that person's needs.
So by playing the martyr, they are actually building a defense mechanism.
Exactly. By taking the blame for everything, they are actually trying to control the narrative. If everything is their fault, they can fix it by just being better, sweeter, more accommodating.
They are avoiding the chaotic truth of their situation to keep the peace at all costs.
Precisely.
That brings up one of the most memorable real-world examples from the reading. The author brings up a pediatric surgeon who completely baffled me. This was a man who was highly intelligent, highly accomplished, winning all these massive professional accolades. But he spent all his free time doing something he absolutely despised.
Right, the croquet umpire.
Yes. Here's a man at the top of his field, but the author noted he had 0 trace of personal pride. He was absolutely miserable on his weekends because he found himself constantly umpiring local croquet matches all over the county.
And he hated umpiring croquet.
He literally couldn't say no.
Yeah.
He told the practitioner, "I never could say no." He subconsciously needed to feel needed by the community, just like the devoted spouse, so he became a willing slave to other people's trivial preferences. He was a hostage to his own sweetness.
And that leads us to an even more complex, perhaps more insidious manifestation of the sweet type, which is the spiritual bypass.
Oh, this part was fascinating.
The text details a doctor who winced at stories of cruelty and resolved to become a missionary in Africa. He stood apart from other medical students, read complicated esoteric books, played the violin, and fully embraced pacifism and unconditional love.
Which sounds incredibly noble on the surface. You hear that and think, what a grounded, enlightened person.
It does sound noble, but the text argues that underneath this supposedly perfect exterior was a great deal of fear, and beneath that fear was that same simmering anger.
So it's a shield.
Exactly. In simple terms, a spiritual bypass is when someone uses high-minded concepts like unconditional love, pacifism, or extreme religious devotion as a shield to avoid standing up for themselves.
They aren't turning the other cheek out of true forgiveness.
No, they are doing it out of fear. His spiritual practices were an elaborate intellectual excuse for his acquiescent sweetness. According to the author, if this man were faced with aggressive direct opposition, he wouldn't stand his ground with calm spiritual resolve. He would back down entirely or physically tremble with fear.
It is wild to think about unconditional love being weaponized as a defense mechanism against your own rage. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the text outlines another subtype that handles this exact same anger in the complete opposite way. Instead of being perfectly sweet, we have the wild Staphysagria.
Yes, the wild type. While the sweet type avoids the anger through pure compliance, the wild type, who the author notes are predominantly male in their clinical experience, copes with their suppressed anger tangentially.
Right.
They suppress it through sheer adrenaline.
Wait, how does adrenaline suppress anger? What are they actually doing?
They are engaging in extreme, thrill-seeking, dangerous adventures, and sometimes severe addiction to mind-altering drugs or reckless sexual exploits.
So it's a distraction.
More than a distraction.
Yeah.
They don't express the anger directly at the people who hurt them. Instead, they purge the intense physical tension that the suppressed anger creates by engaging in death-defying activities.
And the craziest part of the reading is that they actually need the danger to feel a baseline sense of normalcy. The framework suggests that if their life begins to feel safe, quiet, and normal, they get incredibly agitated.
A quiet Sunday at home feels like a terrifying internal chaos to them.
Precisely. Because the silence allows the repressed anger to bubble up. They are literally running from the rage that lies beneath.
And the text shares a striking anecdote about a young mountaineer in California. He was talking casually about negotiating deadly overhangs on his climbing expeditions. During one specific climb, his safety harness broke.
And instead of reacting with normal human panic or immediately seeking safety, he just ignored it.
He just kept climbing.
That's insane.
He actually fell to his death eventually, though in the specific fall mentioned in the text, he survived with only slight injuries. But when the practitioner talked to him about the incident, the young man had this confusing, vague mixture of emotions.
He just brushed it off.
He completely glossed over the reality of the danger. His whole life of extreme travel and wilderness living wasn't about a love of nature. It was a desperate escape from emotions he simply couldn't process.
There was also the war journalist mentioned. He lived a highly varied, wandering life, moving from conflict zone to conflict zone. He actually admitted that he only ever felt completely calm and settled when he was covering war stories, with actual bullets and missiles flying overhead.
That external danger was the only thing loud enough to match and temporarily neutralize his internal chaos. And the author makes a brilliant pop culture comparison here that perfectly encapsulates the wild type.
Oh, the movie reference.
Exactly. Bodhi from the 1990s film Point Break.
Played by Patrick Swayze.
Right. For those who haven't seen it, Bodhi is this highly charismatic surfer who snorts cocaine, robs banks wearing masks of ex-presidents, and surrounds himself with devoted followers.
He's the ultimate adrenaline junkie.
He weds this high-minded, zen-like idealism to his thirst for absolute extreme thrills. He justifies the danger and the crime by calling it a pursuit of personal freedom, but looking at it through this psychological lens, he's just purging the massive tension of his unexpressed anger against authority and societal rules.
It's a fantastic cinematic example. He acts like a guru, but really he's just running away from his own shadow.
The wild type often acts like a lost boy in that exact way. They are excitable, highly impulsive, but underneath all that bravado, they are profoundly sad. They yearn for real intimacy, but their evasiveness and constant need for wild, dangerous distraction prevent them from ever truly finding it.
So we have the sweet type, who pleases everyone to avoid conflict, and the wild type, who outruns the anger with pure adrenaline. That brings us to the third type, the subdued Staphysagria. And this one feels a bit darker, a bit more isolated.
The subdued type is essentially a fugitive from society. While the sweet type learns to avoid conflict by appeasing people, the subdued type avoids social interaction entirely to prevent any possible repetition of their past hurts.
They just opt out.
Exactly. Their childhood taught them that they are completely helpless in the face of punishment or criticism, so their logic is simple. Just hide. Remove yourself from the equation.
The physical description of them in the text is really striking. It paints a picture of someone with a dry, monotone voice. They speak as few words as possible.
Very closed off.
Yeah, they have a mask-like face that never relaxes. Like a genuine smile would literally crack their face. And they have very reticent, highly suspicious eyes.
They are deeply distrusting of everyone around them. They are terrified of dropping their guard for even a second because they believe, down to their core, that they will inevitably get hurt again.
Which leads to total isolation.
As a result, they often live completely isolated lives. Some literally move out into the wilderness to avoid human contact altogether. They're intensely hiding from their own anger, and the sheer mental effort required to keep that suppression locked down often leaves their mind feeling blank, sluggish, or confused.
And once again, there's a perfect cinematic parallel provided to help us visualize this. It really helped me lock in the concept. Clint Eastwood's iconic character in the movie High Plains Drifter.
It is the ultimate caricature of the subdued type. Here is a loner pulling his hat down to hide his eyes, only speaking when he absolutely needs a drink or a room.
Classic Eastwood.
He is constantly running from a terrible secret, which, in the movie, is a violently traumatic past. The climax of these kinds of stories usually involves the character finally wreaking brutal revenge on his oppressors to restore his inner peace.
Right.
And that is the ultimate subdued Staphysagria fantasy, dealing with the original oppressor so they can finally be free of the crippling anger they've carried around for decades.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps the most difficult to spot variant, the smooth Staphysagria. The text suggests this is the most socially successful of all the subtypes.
It is, because on the outside they look incredibly healthy, popular, and well-adjusted. They possess a sheen of normality that makes their core wound very hard to detect, even to trained professionals sometimes.
I just blend right in?
Better than blend in, they shine. They are diplomatic, casual, and incredibly laid back. The author compares their emotional lightness and grace to classic entertainers like Fred Astaire or Bing Crosby.
Smooth operators.
Very smooth. They are charming, witty, and usually very popular with everyone they meet.
But it's a total performance, isn't it? The text points out that they are absolute masters at using clever humor and deflection to keep people away from their personal lives.
Deflection is their superpower.
They will talk endlessly when the conversation is light and breezy. But the second you ask them about their direct feelings, or if they feel threatened by actual emotional intimacy, they either become suddenly terse or just gracefully pivot the subject entirely.
They are profoundly emotionally evasive. They are hiding from their deeper feelings just as much as the isolated, subdued type, but they do it in plain sight,